Let's go back to the beginning, to episode 1 of Learning to Learn. We were talking about baseball and my failure as a hitter.
Right.
Did you hear that? Anyway, what we didn't talk about in episode 1 is what qualifies as a successful hitter, someone who is consistent at the plate. To be considered, let's say, Hall of Fame level consistent, a hitter hits around 300 in the major leagues. Now, for all the baseball fans listening, I know it's more complicated than that. What with your AVG, RBI, OBP, SLG, not to mention OPS, baseball turns into a real alphabet soup of statistics real fast. Thanks, Bill James. But anyway, let's just look at that first one, AVG, aka batting average. For a hitter to hit 300, they've gotten 3 hits out of every 10 at-bats. So they've gotten out, maybe a ground ball to short, a fly ball to left field, or of course, that all-important strikeout.
Strike 2.
Seriously, you all can hear that, right? The point is, being a great hitter in baseball means effectively failing 7 out of 10 times. That's insane. I think if I had realized that in middle school, maybe I would have stuck with it and not been so hard on myself. And that's not just true of baseball. Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, narrowly beats out his player Steph Curry, among others, to have the best career three-point percentage in NBA history. You know what it is? 45.4%. Over their careers, both Steve Kerr and Steph Curry have made less than half of the three-pointers they've attempted, and yet they're still 2 of the greatest to play the game. Let's take it a step further and leave the world of sports metaphors entirely behind us. There are at least half a dozen accidental scientific discoveries: penicillin, Coca-Cola, Velcro, the vulcanized rubber your car tires are made from, even the microwave. You know another way to say accident? Mistake, failure. We end up with the term accident only when something useful emerges, like, a life-saving antibiotic or a way to make hot chocolate without bothering to turn on the stove. Ooh, that's hot. So what's the common denominator? From my middle school days striking out, to major leaguers swinging a bat, to Steve Kerr and Steph Curry popping threes all day, every day, to popping the top off a can of Coca-Cola, what links them all? One word: adaptability. This is Learning to Learn, a Coastline College podcast.
Strike 3, you're out.
Okay, seriously, that's it. I give up. I think this podcast is haunted. Today on Learning to Learn, we're talking about adaptability from the perspective of students. With me is Coastline Student Success Coordinator, to whom learning in college are like his right and left hand, Danny Pittaway. Danny, what do you think of adaptability as it relates to learning?
Well, being adaptable means being open. It means listening, and it means reserving judgment. As human beings, we tend to try to size up situations very quickly. I think a mixture of emotion and reason tend to produce an initial appraisal of whether we feel comfortable or not. I think that we often decide these things very quickly. And if we're not mindful of our thoughts, we can arrive at conclusions that may or may not be helpful to our original purpose.
And what does it mean to be adaptable in the context of a classroom?
Well, first, I would say that everything that I just said also applies to any class setting, whether it's a face-to-face class, online, or some combination. To put it another way, a class or a course is an environment. And like any environment, there's various ways to engage with it. On Learning to Learn, I think the message we're trying to convey is to acknowledge that any environment, even a familiar one, can be fraught with challenges that are important to overcome.
Is part of being adaptable not actually changing anything at all? So you can adapt almost by staying the same?
I think if someone consistently operates with an open mind and has a generally high tolerance for ambiguity, then yes. However, it's very difficult to do that all the time. Human beings are creatures of habit, and it seems like we're always trying to settle and sustain. But this can lead to complacency, and over time, it can lead to inflexibility or an unwillingness to adapt. I think this is natural because it seems like we all have a tendency to conserve energy and not expend it when we aren't sure that there is some clear outcome or award or reward for doing so. But I also think that a lot of this thinking is flawed. We might tell ourselves that we wish everything stayed the same all the time, or we might tell ourselves that we've figured it all out. But that's just not how life seems to work. We're consistently and constantly challenged in life. I think it's perfectly normal to feel weary from this from time to time. But overall, we need to find ways to function with courage, determination, and humility. Put another way, life is a nonstop ride, and we have to be able to stomach the ups and downs and enjoy it while we have it. I think a particular challenge in life and learning is to remain happy and optimistic, even in times of significant challenge.
And to that point, at the end of our last episode, when we were talking about Natalie, you brought up a growth mindset. What is that, and how does it relate to this topic?
Yeah, the idea of a growth mindset, particularly as it's been popularized by researcher Carol Dweck, is that we go forward in our lives on a daily basis, unafraid to fail, unafraid to stumble. With a growth mindset, we accept that learning is difficult and challenging, and experiencing difficulty or challenge is normal and to be expected. And we want to engage with those challenges, not run away from them. With a growth mindset, there's a belief in the value of practice, of studying, of trying. The key with a growth mindset is to become comfortable with the uncomfortable process of learning and therefore growing. Growing is painful. Exercising is painful, but there are clear benefits that make it worthwhile. Similarly, learning is painful. As creatures of habit, we tend to want to make do with what we came in the door with, so to speak. But this leads to limitations that we essentially place on ourselves. It's as if we are saying to ourselves, that's okay. I don't really want to work that hard. I don't believe anything will come of it. I'll just expend a bunch of energy for nothing. That's what's called having a fixed mindset. This is the kind of negative self-talk we may be tempted to engage in, but a growth mindset reminds us to function with courage and determination, to not be swayed by setbacks or unseen challenges. There's also the power of yet when exercising a growth mindset. Just because you don't know something today doesn't mean you can't figure it out tomorrow. The key is to keep trying. There's no such thing as natural talent that allows people to live effortless lives. That just doesn't exist. Anyone who has ever achieved anything significant did so as the result of a tremendous amount of preparation, practice, and belief in themselves.
And also probably a bit of luck too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as we can form habits that may not serve us well in an ever-changing world that calls on us to be adaptable, we can equally use that propensity to form habits that serve us well and that help us to grow and learn. As I said earlier, life's full of constant challenges. Those will never go away. And if we act with adaptability and a growth mindset in one instance, we can just as easily abandon it and go back to being difficult or closed off to learning in a new situation. It's amazingly complex because we can easily allow ourselves to become overwhelmed, stressed, whatever it may be, to the point where we want to disengage from the very thing that will actually help us lead a healthier, happier life.
How do you think esports and video games relate to this topic of adaptability?
It takes an enormous amount of patience to become good at or successful with video gaming. As an old school gamer from the 1980s, I know firsthand how challenging and self-nullifying it is to die over and over at the same spot in a game. Games of the 1980s were amazingly difficult, and I often wonder if the designers knew they were creating sequences and game flows that were difficult to the point of being maddening. But perhaps in a pure way, these types of challenges called for a growth mindset. You had to have determination to keep practicing, to keep trying, no matter how many times your character fell from that virtual cliff or was clipped by that wayward bird flying across the screen, just as you're trying to span the gap between some ancient pillars. Playing Nintendo games from the 1980s tests not only your mettle, but your patience and perhaps even your sanity. Being adaptable, flexible, and exercising a growth mindset is just as important in gaming as it is in other areas of life. And also back then, there often was no way to save the game, to come back to it later. You could maybe try to leave your game system on and pause it and hope that nobody walked by and interrupted that fragile electronic tether that was the only thing that keeping your progress alive. More often than not, though, eventually you call it a day and you start over from the beginning. I think that's a true test of grit if there ever was one.
Coming up on Learning to Learn, my interview with two esports professional experts who work with Coastline's blossoming esports club. This is Learning to Learn. Stick around. here on Learning to Learn. With us today, we have Coastline's esports experts, Katherine and Stephanie. Also to help facilitate and potentially translate my bad questions into better questions is Noah Nelson, Coastline's esports blog writer. But Katherine and Stephanie, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Katherine Amoukhteh. I always cringe a little bit, but this is my official title at Coastline. I am the professional expert in esports.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Bridges, and I'm a full-time English instructor at Coastline College, and I am the faculty advisor for Coastline's Esports Club.
Awesome. Stephanie, can you tell me a little bit about what esports is, how it works, about the team at Coastline? Pretend I'm an idiot. You might not even have to pretend.
Okay, so esports, and Katherine can help me anytime she wants to in this question, but so esports really is a type of gaming or a section of the gaming industry where players play against each other, just like you would in a regular sports event. The way that we are framing esports at Coastline, though, is any sort of gaming in the club. So students play Among Us together. They might play ARAM with League together. They play Siege, but we also do less or non-competitive games like Scribble and Jackbox.
Yes, Saul, I just want to add that Stephanie's exactly right. Our esports club is named esports, but it's really an esports / gaming club. And we really strive to include everyone within the esports and gaming industry or ecosystem. And so whether you're just whether you're a player or you're a shoutcaster or you want to be a team manager or you want to learn the business side of esports and gaming, we welcome everyone into the community. And like Stephanie says, we have done a lot of non-competitive esports games as well, or gaming games as well. Like we played Among Us, we did Jackbox quite a few times, I think, in one of our casual events. So we strive just to include everyone.
That makes sense. It's giving an opportunity to anyone to fill any sort of role that you might have on a professional level with esports. Obviously this episode is about adaptability and flexibility and what does that mean? When you described esports, Stephanie, it seemed that to me, when you're talking about these gameplays, especially the competitive ones, but maybe even, I don't know, you said Scribble, like Among Us, like there's an aspect of it that is also about just thinking on your feet in general. Would you say there's a lot of adapting or being flexible when you're playing a game like that or games like that?
I think Among Us is a really great example of needing to be adaptable during gameplay. So it's not necessarily competitive in the same sense as we think of with esports, like with League of Legends or Call of Duty or something. But it is competitive because there is a clear winner at the end. It's either going to be the imposter or it's going to be the crewmates. And you have to be adaptable, right? You have to be flexible and you have to be able to draw conclusions based off of evidence presented to you within the game very quickly. And you also have to be able to persuade others to agree with you. And it's so much fun. Like I'm getting excited and probably you can't see me because it's a podcast, but I'm smiling because I really like playing Among Us with my friends. We played it with our Dean, Dana Emerson, and a couple other staff and an admin a while ago. And it's just so much fun to sit there and try to think about who is the imposter and how are they manipulating the situation in order to, trick you and win the game.
And Katherine, when you're managing the team and you talked about the different roles and, having club members participate in all these different facets and ways, do you have to be adaptable then, be willing to compromise or change strategy or help, club members learn how to be adaptable in those situations?
Oh, absolutely. I think we talk a lot about transferable skills, right, between esports, video gaming into other, real life jobs, no matter what you want to go into. Like for example, one of our president of our club, esports club, she wants to I think she wants to go to nutrition or something like that, which has nothing to do, it's not really esports or video gaming. So I think that, like you're saying, with adaptability, the definition of adaptability is being able to adjust to new conditions, right? And I think that, especially in esports, is essential. Like Stephanie says, playing Among Us, which is a little bit slower game, but like, she's a Dota 2 player, and you have to adapt quite quickly, adapt to your opponent as well as adapt to your own teammates, in gameplay. Not just in esports and video gaming is adaptability important, but just in life in general. And I think that video gaming, I think as a pastime or as a competitive play, I think is a great training grounds to get this kind of skill honed in and get better at it.
That makes sense. And I know that both of you have worked, and that's definitely currently works, and Stephanie's English teacher. And Katherine, I know we've spoken before, and you said you were an engineer, an industrial engineer, something along like that. That those are obviously both different than esports. And so you guys have both had to adapt in your own ways. Can each of you talk a bit about that?
I've thought a lot about that, about, engineering or in English and how it goes into esports and why and how, right? I think that there's a lot of commonalities in it, I was an engineer for a long time before I went to esports and became an engineering teacher. And a lot of that has to do with, teamwork, have to do with conflict resolution, being able to adapt or adjust or recover when you make a mistake, And I think that two things for me that's really important, no matter what you do in life and do for a job, is curiosity and creativity. And I think with those two, the two C's as we call them, right? I think you'd be successful no matter what you do. So adaptability is definitely part of that. I think that for me, going from the different steps in my career, ending up here now as an esports expert, I think it seemed very logical at the time to go from engineering to training to teaching. And then as a teacher, when I was a team manager and how I saw esports as a great tool to engage students that I otherwise couldn't reach, and also that students could now use as a tool to get to college with the full ride scholarships or partial scholarships that's available, or just being on a team and have a supportive system, in the college environment, right? When you're very young, going away to college. So I guess that's a very long answer, but I think that that transition and adaptability from one career to the other is very important. And I think that for most students who go to school, whether you're a math major or you're a computer science major, what you end up doing in your career may be totally different.
Stephanie, did you want to add anything specifically, like as it relates to, teaching English as compared to esports?
Well, before that, I want to refer back to something that Katherine was talking about, like transferable skills. So adaptability is really important within the workplace. So then, for my job, it's really important. Like, it's a requirement in order for instructors to be flexible within the classroom. You have to be able to make decisions, instantaneously, adapt to the needs of your students. If students are understanding a concept, you need to be able to explain it in a different way and provide examples without any prep, really. But if you're thinking about the general workforce, it's important for students to be able, or future employees to be adaptable, because no employer really wants an employee who's going to face a problem and then break down, shut down, cry, and then maybe fix it later, right? We need to create a workforce that's able to identify a problem or encounter a problem, identify the problem, and work collaboratively to create a solution to that problem. And esports really does offer us the opportunity to work with students to develop those skills. Like we were talking about in Among Us, or Katherine was talking about, like how when we play Dota 2 or when the students are playing League of Legends, you have to be able to communicate clearly, communicate effectively, and be open to constructive criticism, right? Keyword constructive, right? Not just mean criticism, and be able to work together to achieve a common goal. And, this relates to my profession just because I'm a teacher, and this is something that we deal with in the classroom all the time, and skills that we try to help our students develop. But as a person outside of the teaching profession, before I decided to become a teacher, I worked in corporate communications, and I was beginning to develop my resume materials and portfolio to start applying to be part of the esports and gaming industry, to also work in corporate communications or wherever they would have me, really, because people who pursue careers within gaming and esports are usually the ones who play games. So Katherine looked at esports as a way to engage students. I looked at the esports club as a way to share my passion with students, right? So we're approaching it from different angles, and each angle is equally important because you need someone who wants to play the games with the kids. Students, they're not children, they're my age, but you want to engage them by playing with them, by sharing your passion with them, but also to look at it as an engagement tool and a retention tool and a success tool.
That makes sense. I didn't think of it that way, but I totally appreciate the different angles of looking at it. Do you think the will not to change course? So we've talked a lot about how flexibility and adapting, but do you think the not changing course is its own kind of adaptability too?
Dr. Emerson, Katherine, and I really wanted to use esports at Coastline. Like we talked about, Katherine was looking at it more from like the admin staff perspective, and I was looking at it more from the faculty or like someone who just wanted to game, right, perspective. But the way that esports is perceived by the general population, right, the association with esports is gradually shifting, but I wouldn't say that it has shifted overnight to where people respect it. Right. A lot of the associations with esports are negative. The associations people have with who are playing the games, with why we're playing the games, the type of people who play the games. Right. So like, as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about the common stereotype of the I don't want to say this because it's negative, but this is really the stereotype, is that it's somebody who has no drive, somebody who just sits there and munches on Cheetos and Mountain Dew, just like an unhealthy person who doesn't have any drive to go anywhere. And that really isn't the case, right? There's so many people who game now, whether it's competitively or casually, who are successful, right? Most of the people who work within the gaming industry are gamers, and those people are obviously successful. Or even just high schoolers now who are gaming. It's not because they have no friends and no social skills. It's because they're developing social skills in a new way, right? They're using the internet as a way to create friend groups, to develop their social skills for the world that we have today.
Obviously, it seems like from our conversation, esports is a growing part of Coastline. How is the club overall adaptable?
So the club is constantly changing. We're always evolving, and we are evolving to meet the needs of the students. We're evolving to meet the needs of the college. Right now, we're working on developing a gaming lounge for students. For once we return back to campus, the students will have access to all of the hardware and software that they need in order to practice hands-on skills that they could use if they were to pursue a career within the gaming industry or the esports ecosystem, or even just if they decided they wanted to go into broadcasting or digital graphic arts or anything like that. We're also working on developing the gaming lounge so it's accessible to gamers of all ability levels. So we can include students from our special programs, or students, our veterans, or any other student who is interested in participating in the club. We're also working on developing curriculum that aligns with the club, or kind of aligns with the ideas or concepts within the club, right? So each one of our non-credit certificates will align with the pathway that a student can pursue within the gaming industry. And these certificates are meant to complement the credit degrees that students can earn. So if a student decides that they want to do business admin as a degree, so they want to get a BA in business admin, they can also get a non-credit certificate that demonstrates their competency within esports, right? So to make them more attractive to potential hiring managers.
Do either of you have any advice for, it could be a student, someone who's trying to get a job? I guess maybe start with being a student, or it could be esports specific advice for how to be adaptable, or what that would look like.
Sure. Let me just take that quickly. I go back to the definition, the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions. And I think that we as people have to realize that our conditions are always going to be changing. I think right now we're all, going through COVID, right? And I think that if this is not an experiment in adaptability, I don't know what it is. The whole world has had to adapt. And I think that we, on the other side, have shown that we can survive the day. So as long as we learn from this, is that yes, the world can go upside down, and we just have to adapt to it, find a way for us to be able to survive the day. I think it's a win.
Thank you both for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I know Danny really appreciates it as well. So thank you. Welcome back to Learning to Learn, and we are back with Danny Pitaway to reflect on what Katherine and Stephanie said about adaptability. Danny, what were some of your takeaways?
Well, I really like that both Stephanie and Katherine spoke about the need to be adaptable. There are challenges and opportunities that abound, as they both spoke to, and I think they made it very clear that the ability to problem solve in real time, the ability to be resilient, to be flexible, in other words, to be willing to evolve, is mirrored both by gameplay and how the club situates itself within the college. I also like that they talked about transferable skills and how the values inculcated within the club are designed to assist students in other areas of their life. For that reason alone, I think they did a fantastic job of addressing the value proposition behind being adaptable. Why be adaptable? Because it is the way forward, not only to create something, but to sustain it and grow it. That's what resonated with me from their discussion.
How do you think it relates to what we were talking about earlier in the episode?
Well, regardless of environment, being adaptable means exercising a growth mindset to position yourself within that environment, to understand it, and to persist or persevere despite obstacles or challenges that may come your way. Being resilient is key to our ability to move forward in environments that are unpredictable, ever-shifting, and real. It requires energy, commitment, and courage.
In the teaser of the episode, we talk about adaptability in the face of failure, specifically with regard to baseball, basketball, and then science. Does that tie in at all?
Yes, absolutely. Failures aren't really failures unless there is nothing that was learned from that experience. Failure is a necessary step. And when we learn from our failures, they become steps forward. It's not possible to get to the proverbial goal line or the desired outcome you want in one step. And it could very well be that the path from where you are now to where you want to be is traversed by making several failures in a row. A hockey goalie can't get hung up on their failure to block the most recent shot because the game continues. There will be other shots on goal and other chances to defend the net. These are productive failures that allow you to reflect, adapt, and try again. Before you know it, you cross that goal line or stop that shot.
On some level, adaptability and its relationship with resilience is about not knowing the answer ahead of time. A scientist doesn't or shouldn't go into an experiment with the outcome predetermined. Nor do you know ahead of time how you're going to beat Ganon in Legend of Zelda or who the imposter is in a game of Among Us. Steph Curry fundamentally doesn't know if his shots are going to go into the basket, and a baseball player doesn't know 100% what will be a hit, a home run, or just a pop fly. In episode 1, we talked about how it's okay to fail. It's natural. Now in episode 3, we have a better understanding of what you do after. Be resilient, persist, and then adjust if you need to. Even if you decided, for whatever reason, not to pursue whatever it is that you aim to achieve, you haven't really failed. As Katherine and Stephanie pointed out about their esports club members, you've just gained a lifetime of skills, values, and ideas, all of which you can take with you wherever you go. That includes the ballpark, the court, the lab, and of course, running around the fields, valleys, and mountains of Hyrule. Thank you to Stephanie Bridges and Katherine Amoukhteh for their honesty. Thank you as well to Dean Dana Emerson for kickstarting the Esports Club, which allowed for this interview to exist in the first place. And thank you as well to Noah Nelson for his intrepid attitude and for translating my very jumbled video game questions. This episode of Learning to Learn was hosted by Danny Pitaway and Saul Rubin. It was co-written by Danny Pitaway and produced, edited, and co-written by yours truly, Saul Rubin. The LTL themes were written and produced by Elijah Rubin. Special thanks to Coastline College, Don Wilson, and the entire marketing team.